Hello, Stephanie. Thanks for joining us in Scouted by Gravy. And actually, we regularly research about innovative startups in biosciences, and Axolotl Biosciences popped up in my research when we were looking at startups working in 3D printing in medical industry. And the most interesting thing was the name. So Axolotl Biosciences, it's a very interesting name, and it's one of my favorite aquatic animals, specifically knowing their regenerative abilities. So I just wanted to start our interview with this. So what inspired you to pick this name for your company?
Yeah, there was a few things. So my co-founder, Dr. Laura de la Vega, is from Mexico. And then my research group, so in addition to running Axolotl Biosciences, I have a research lab at the University of Victoria, and the axolotl was always our mascot due to its highly regenerative nervous system. And a lot of people use it as an animal to study regenerative medicine. So we were always big fans. And I do even have a 3D printed axolotl on my desk currently. So those were some of the reasons. And then when we were spinning off the company and it cleared legal, we were really excited to have that as our name.
That's a very interesting story, and I've seen them in a lot of videos, but I've never really seen them one live. So Stephanie, I'd like to start with this, and with the very basic question is like basically what Exolot does. So if you have to explain it to common people who maybe don't know about stem cells and 3D bioprinting, so how will you explain it? What do you guys do?
Yeah, we'll go back to my friend, the axolotl. Most people, and actually a lot of people, and I have one at home too, are really familiar with traditional 3D printing where you heat up a plastic filament and then you can extrude it into different shapes, like this axolotl here. So 3D bioprinting is similar to that, but instead of having a filament you heat up, because obviously with cells, you don't want to have them in harsh conditions, you use specialized bioinks in order to print out your desired tissue structure. And so what Axolotl does is we actually sell the ink that you use to print your cells into the tissue. So we don't make the printers. Our ink does work with a lot of different printers, but where we really innovated is that, as you mentioned, so our body's made up of cells, and there's a type of cell called the stem cell, which can become more than one cell type found in the body. And these stem cells are often really delicate. So they tend to not like the bioprinting process because, they undergo different forces like pressure and fluid flow as they get extruded through the system. So we made an ink that was really good at keeping stem cells alive and then also differentiating into different types of tissue. And that's really what we do at Axolotls, have these really innovative bioinks to print really sophisticated tissue models.
Okay, so that sounds very interesting. So basically, what Axolotl is doing is you've created inks that can act just like a real tissue, and basically you can give it any shape you want, and basically it can be used in different kind of medical scenarios where you want tissues on chip, or maybe you want it for implants. So am I getting it right?
Yeah, yeah. And so our ink is really versatile. Like right now, we currently sell mainly to academics. And a lot of the work with the bioprinting neural tissues that we do, you aren't going to necessarily be implanting into a human brain tissue directly, but you can use them as a tool for drug screening to see if a drug is going to affect the ability of the nerve cells to fire. We also have some really interesting Alzheimer's models where you can actually see the disease phenotype. So potentially, if you could reverse those symptoms in a dish, you could prescribe that drug back to the patient whose cells you made them from. On the company side, with our inks, in addition to all the neural work, we have bioprinted some skin, cardiac tissue, blood vessels, and our basic tissue print is really a versatile product. And then our second product, Brain Print, it is patented. And it has these drug-releasing particles, so it really effectively makes neural tissue from stem cells. And we are finishing up our beta testing of that product right now. And then we've also been working with some of the doctors at University of British Columbia on a third product, which is a bioink for printing cardiac tissue.
Interesting. And when I was going through your website, I saw that you also mentioned the application of your ink into personalized medication. So can you tell me a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, yeah. So, like I was saying with our Alzheimer's project, we can get stem cells. So, there's one way of making stem cells is you can do a blood draw or a skin biopsy, and then you treat those cells with factors that change them back from either being a blood cell or a skin cell into being a stem cell that can become any cell type found in your body. And so, we've done that with some of the Alzheimer's patients that Dr. Hakan Nygaard works with at the University of British Columbia. And so then we can actually take those cells and print our neural tissues, and it has the same genetics as the patient. We've also done similar work with cancer cell lines as well. And so, in that sense, you could, in theory, take a patient's, biopsy their cancer and then print a bunch of cancer tissues and then see what drugs are best for treating that particular type of cancer.
Okay, okay. This sounds very sci-fi at the
Yeah.
moment, but it's very interesting, and I can see a lot of innovation going in this area. And I think my next question is also around the same lines. So you must have already heard about Bioinks, 4D biomaterials. These startups are also working in similar Bioinks, and they are also using 3D bioprinting. So I wanted to ask your views about it. Basically, how is Axolotl Biosciences doing? What kind of different things you are doing, and how do you compare with these similar other startups? Is this the technology different, or is the target market different? Basically, just wanted to your view.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been an interesting time in the 3D printing field. As I said, one of the things is that we really focus on the materials and the inks themselves, and being able to print really delicate cells, whereas a lot of other inks started from a point of what is printable as opposed to the biology. Another thing that's kind of unique about our inks and the tissues we print is once they're printed, they'll maintain their shape and you can culture them. For example, with our Alzheimer's tissues, we've cultured them for up to 60 days. And so you really get mature neural tissue with electric signals, chemical signals that you'd see in tissues you'd find in the human body. And so I think that those are some of the things that really differentiate our technology from some of the competitors in the field. And then, as I said, we do have a patent around our smart bioinks, which I guess in a sense you could consider to be sort of a 4D bioink, because you do get controlled release of these morphogens over time. And we also have some really interesting work currently under review at a journal, where it shows that having these drug releasing particles also helps make more physiologically relevant tissues as well.
Okay, okay, that sounds very good. Okay, so I was reading about your background as well, and I see that you and basically a lot of team of Axolotl Biosciences coming from a very deep academic background, and you being a doctor yourself. So how has been your journey transitioning from science and research background into now entrepreneurship and running a company?
Yeah, it's been interesting. My co-founder, Dr. De La Vega, she actually did minor in entrepreneurship, so she was always much more keen on starting a company. We've been lucky to receive a significant amount of funding and grant support to commercialize our technology from different funding organizations in Canada, like INSERC, CIHR, the Michael Smith, Health Research BC, Innovate BC, the National Research Council. So that's been really helpful at transitioning. As a professor, you do sort of run a mini business anyway. It's just with grant money. Although I will say, I think some of the things I appreciate now that we have a company is a lot of the quality control that we've done to ensure that our inks will function as a viable product. A lot of the cost reduction stuff, I feel like, wow, we should have done a long time ago. And so I think that professors can benefit from an entrepreneurial mindset, especially when it comes to research. And I'll say I was guilty of this, like when I was doing my PhD. You do something, you get a protocol that works, you're like, great. Then you collect all the data you need to publish your paper. And you don't necessarily optimize more than that because you're like, okay, good. Like we have something that works. We don't need to like go further. But when you actually are commercializing stuff, then you really need to make sure you have good reproducibility, stability, and things like that. And so I think it's really helped to inform our work. And I do know some of the grad students have been really excited, especially with our Smart Bioink work. When we've been collaborating, we did a large collaboration with Starfish Medical, which is a medical device consulting firm that's located both here in Victoria, where I work, and they also have another location in Toronto. And I know that one of our chemistry students was really excited to see one of the microfluidic devices he made and us scaling it up and making a commercial version of it. They thought the whole process was really, really cool.
That's good, and good. It's good to know that you're already collaborating with big names out there. So, how has been the collaboration strategy working out with Exolot Bioscience? Basically, what's on the horizon? What are your next step regarding
Yeah,
expansion?
yeah, we're hopefully, yeah, we've had a few meetings with some of the bigger biotechs about avenues for collaboration and using our inks in some of their research programs. And we do have a few companies that are interested in doing potential distribution of our inks overseas. While we're based out of Canada, the biggest market for bioinks is the United States. Although there is really strong bioprinting, interestingly, in Asia and Australia, especially Korea, and also in Europe as well, which is where Cellink, who sells a lot of the bioprinters, is based out of. So yeah, we're pretty excited to see where things go. We've got some applications in to support further development of our cardiac bioink, and we're hoping to commercially launch BrainPrint as a product soon as well.
Okay, that sounds very exciting, and I'm sure this It sounds very exciting, but it might also be very challenging to expand. And there are some challenges you already mentioned, the scalability of things. There might be other challenges as well. So, is there anything that Axolotl Biosciences is currently trying to tackle in order to get to these goals?
Yeah, I mean, we are currently fundraising, and I know, so it was kind of interesting since we decided we are close friends and collaborators with Aspect Biosystems out of Vancouver. My research group was got, I think, their second ever printer, and we've published a lot with it. So when they signed their big deal with Novo, because we have been very successful bringing grant funding, and we do have customers and things like that. We had kind of held off on fundraising, and then Aspect had their big announcement. I was like, great, now will be the perfect time to raise. Aspect, blew the valuation cap, really showed that 3D bioprinting is a well over $1 billion market. And that was when Silicon Valley Bank failed, and then it seemed like the biotech apocalypse occurred all last year when we were just being like, okay, now it's time to fundraise. I think things are getting better right now. We just got back, and we just did the BioTools Innovator Program, which was great, and so we were pitching in Boston. So yeah, we are currently fundraising on a safe. Most of the scientific challenges have been easier to address because we do have a really talented team and a really talented network of collaborators. Yeah, and so it'll be hopefully we'll see more recovery in the biotech industry, not just for Axolotl, but for everyone too. Hopefully as things start to recover. Although I do know there's like some uncertainty now with the elections and things like that.
And now that you mention it, I also saw that Axolotl Biosciences was started around COVID pandemic.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
we incorporated the week of the pandemic. I do always say I don't recommend doing that, but there was, yeah, it took forever to get our bank accounts opened because everyone else was creating fake businesses. So that took a really long time. Also, weirdly, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that also changed like how we had to do our banking, which I was like very surprised about. But yeah, so we started and we were initially remote. We still work at the university where we have a rental contract with them, and so we're looking to get off campus. Our friends at Vancouver Island Life Sciences, we've been working with them to get an off-campus biomanufacturing facility here in Victoria. And I know that Admari got similar funding for Vancouver-based to increase the amount of wet lab space in Vancouver.
okay, thanks for sharing all these challenges and giving the both aspect of funding and the scientific
Yeah,
challenges that
yeah.
you shared. Okay, so now basically apart from this, the scientific and the funding challenge, did you also face any regulatory approval challenges while working, or are you currently facing, or have you already sold those?
Yeah, so since we're selling for research use, we just have an end user license. So we did get legal to write that up. We haven't gone the FDA approval route. Our ink is, free, so I think it would be pretty straightforward to get it to be used for clinical applications in humans. We don't currently have facilities in British Columbia to make ink in GMP standards, but there are other facilities in Toronto and actually in Arizona that can potentially do that. So it's definitely something we think about. And if we were to partner with the right group, if somebody had a really exciting cell therapy that worked well with our ink, like I could see us going that route towards making a transplanted tissue. They have actually implanted 3D bioprinted tissues into humans. So that has been done for years. So nothing super complex yet. I do think you'll probably start seeing people like skin will be an easy one, I think, to bioprint. Like bioprinting skin grafts on people will probably be one that you'll see soon. And obviously, Aspect has been working with some of their tissues for treating diabetes as well.
Good to know that. And it's very interesting thing that you say skin will be easy to print later. So is that something that you plan on expanding into anytime soon, or is this a long-term goal for Axolotl Biosciences?
Yeah, no, we actually do have a lot of skin work going on currently. Our basic tissue print that we sell, we sort of went backwards because neural tissues are very complex and very finicky. And then Dr. Stephen Tufts, who is a new professor here at the University of Victoria, he studies the skin microbiome. So we actually printed some skin for him to see how bacteria interact with the cells in our complex skin model. And so we've been focused on that through that collaboration. So it is something we're interested in. And I know that with some of our potential pharmaceutical collaborators, they are interested in having a skin model. And one more recently, we was also talking about the potential of doing a gut model as well.
That's great. So Stephanie, so this is again this I'm not from this industry, and that's why I think you might have already noticed as well. I don't have a background knowledge on all of, lot of this, but what I know is being from Gravy and dealing with a lot of research work. What I can already see is you have a huge academic background and really in-depth experience of things. So from my perspective, I wanted to understand how are you planning protecting your IP at the moment in Axolotl. I see you published a lot of research papers already. So do you have any patents or any
Yeah.
trade secrets that you guys are using?
Yeah, yeah. So our base ink is essentially a trade secret, but I also compare it to something like MTeaser, like cell culture media for stem cells, where the recipe's been published, but it's really difficult to make. And so a lot of our customers would rather just buy Bioink and know that it works than have their student mess around with it. We do have a patent awarded in Europe for our smart Bioinks around drug releasing microspheres. We're currently finishing up prosecution in the US and Canada as well. And then on the axolotl side, we do have some IP, some preliminary ideas on how to go about patenting our tissue models as well.
Okay. So apart from all this, and now I'll jump back to the challenges that you shared and various aspect of the challenges. So during your time on your journey of making this, like from starting from COVID, that was already very difficult time, and then there are scientific challenges, and now you guys are also trying to solve funding challenges. During all this time, did you ever feel like that maybe this is not going to work, maybe this is going to be very difficult to run this company or it might fail? Did you ever go through that phase?
Probably at some point, but I remember being like, "Well, we started during COVID, so if it kind of is what it is." As I said, I've enjoyed it more than I had thought, running the company. And honestly, like I think the really cool part is seeing other researchers use our tech to do research that I wouldn't do personally. So it's kind of like having a lot more researchers working for you. So in that sense, it's been really enjoyable. Yeah, we were lucky to just sort of because we have a pretty lean operation to make it through last year without having to give up equity, despite the tough fundraising environment. But I'm optimistic now. I think the investment situation is going to get a bit better, and we sort of changed our strategy a bit for that. So yeah, so in general, pretty positive.
Yeah, and that's a quality I've noticed in a lot of founders and co-founders, that being positive and carrying this very optimistic approach towards running your company and solving challenges. This always works. And it's good to see you also sharing the same advice. One more thing I wanted to ask is, and you mentioned it earlier as well, and I also read it about on your website, is your co-founder, Dr. Laura, who also studied and did their development work under your guidance. So how has this relationship been for your company? For example, if to just to narrow it down, how do you guys resolve conflicts or disagreements maybe sometimes, or how do you decide on which direction to grow your company or which direction to do to take on the next research challenge? Is that something that happens, or basically just wanted your views about it?
Yeah, yeah, no, we've known each other for a really long time. So she had initially visited my lab and spent a summer working there as an undergrad, and then came back to do her PhD. It's a bit unique because her husband is a fighter pilot in the U.S. military, so he was stationed in Seattle when she was doing her PhD here, and then they moved to San Diego, and then now she's currently in Japan. So that's why we've had a lot of axolotl focus on doing business in Japan. And yeah, and usually we just talk out things when we have conflict. And we try to identify things that we know are going to be issues early on. We have a pretty positive team culture. We're a startup, so while we don't necessarily pay the best, we do. People who work at Axolotl do get chances for professional development. So I'm always like, well, if you want to pitch, do you want to speak? Like, what do you want to write? Like, sort of to give people like the development that they need. Um, and yeah, we tend to be pretty open and communicative about things with our team Slack, and we have weekly meetings to talk about any issues that might come up.
Okay, that's great. So, any advice you'd like to share with other founders who are like just getting started in this? This is a very tough industry, biosciences and biomedical industry, right? So,
Yeah, I would just say definitely good communication is really key. Getting good lawyers is also a good thing, especially when it comes to some of the things like with IP and doing shareholders agreements and things like that. You'll want a good lawyer on your side. And also like to help you if like in our case we had to negotiate our IP out of the university as well. So there's like a lot of different moving parts there.
Thanks for sharing this. And with that, Stephanie, I think I'm at the end of my question lines. And it was very great knowing uh, Axolotl Biosciences, and I got to know a lot of new stuff.